Hi, I'm Carl Christensen, and these are my parents. Today we're going to listen to experimental music together. So, what, if anything, do you guys know about the artist Clipping? I talk about Clipping all the time because I am a huge Clipping stan, but I also know that you guys probably tune me out a lot when I start talking about music, and I wouldn't hold that against you at all.
I know nothing about clipping. I believe it's a penalty in football.
Okay.
I know that I've heard you talk about clipping, as you say, and I do believe that the genre that you refer to as experimental, but kind of experimental rap.
You're correct. Clipping is a hip-hop group based out of Los Angeles, California. They are comprised of 3 members. The rapper, who's named David Diggs, who's also known for his work in Hamilton. The 2 producers are named William Hudson and Jonathan Snipes, and they both are really into noise music, which is a form of electronic and experimental music from kind of like the 70s through the 80s and in the 90s, where people were experimenting with just noise for the sake of noise and trying to kind of reduce music down to its most bare bones. Clipping have a few self-imposed rules about how they can make music and how David Diggs is allowed to rap. But the one that I find the most interesting is they have banned the use of the word I in all of their music. They have said that A, they can't tell true stories, and B, David can't use the word I. In 2019, they released an album called There Existed an Addiction to Blood, and the idea in that album is every single song is like a little vignette and a little self-contained story with the theme running through it of horror movies, and being frightening. So this album, Visions of Bodies Being Burned, is the sequel to There Existed an Addiction to Blood. Yeah, do you have any questions?
Can we get started?
Yeah, great question. The first intro track is ominous as all hell. So you have all these bass drum hits, and then when we finally get lyrics, every single time the bass drum hits, it gets more and more distorted and crunchy and electronic and less natural until by the end it's just this screech.
Horror movies are my absolute least favorite genre of movie.
Yeah, me too, actually, yeah.
This obviously is in that same vein. Not that means it's not a legitimate genre, it's just not a genre that I spend much time with. But I agree with you that the bass drum kind of went on so much that I was like, really? Are there going to be lyrics? Then when the lyrics came in, the distortion of them, made it kind of hard to process, but at the same time, completely consistent with the genre that you had described.
Perhaps because you mentioned science fiction at the outset. It was kind of giving me the sense of Blade Runner.
So the intro track leads us into Say the Name. I think if there's one song on the album that you could get away with playing at a party, this would be it. It would have to be some sort of Halloween-themed party. Probably couldn't get away with playing it at a normal party just because the lyrics,
Like a Christmas party.
Yeah, you couldn't play it at a Christmas party. Visions of bodies being burned. Not the vibe for a Christmas party.
If you didn't think it was going to be dark before, this is... It's like mayhem, and this is where it turns from Blade Runner into The Godfather.
Yeah, exactly.
Reference to somebody with their brains leaking out.
Yeah, out their forehead.
Like Swiss cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely dark.
Maybe just because this was a little longer, and I don't know that I fully understand the story, but I did feel like there was a little bit more of a narrative in this one.
Yeah, as opposed to...
than the first one. And I will also admit or point out that I am not real skilled at reading poetry. I in fact don't ever remember being taught how to read poetry, and this is a narrative told in a poetic style. Yeah,
100%. Then we get into the first of several interlude tracks, which I think, I love this transition because...
The Ouija board?
Yeah, the Ouija board where they're like, he is here? What is that? Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, and that's like That's like classic. I mean, it's like they've just lifted it right out of some.
Oh yeah, like I don't know whether it's voice actors.
Yeah,
movie, yeah. You know? I don't know if it's voice actors or they've sampled it from a horror movie,
maybe
or what?
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, maybe Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, yeah.
It's totally camp, but I totally love it. As more and more female rappers are in the spotlight, we get a lot of songs in kind of the bad bitch character of this sort of like, I'm the boss, I'm a woman and I'm running shit. We have a lot of Megan Thee Stallion songs like that. We have a lot of Cardi B songs like that. And I feel like 98 Campbell is sort of Clipping's version of that. Every single Clipping album has a fantastic featured female rapper on it, and I think they really knocked it out of the park with this.
Yeah, this was where the lyrics started becoming so dense that I was like, I need a break. And it's not just the speed at which it's going, but it's the density.
Yeah.
I want to unpack every sentence.
Yeah.
I feel like here was this massive poetry that was thrown at me like, drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when the female rappers were.
Yeah.
Man,
they're blisteringly fast.
Wow.
Yeah. Really impressive.
Yeah,
really impressive.
It was.
Every time I listen to or read lyrics like this, I think about, like, it's not an actual spreadsheet, it's a hypothetical spreadsheet that I've made in my mind of, like, word count to dollars made. And the bottom line is always Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire. Because there are, like, 25 words in that whole song. And he probably made $1 million off of it. Yeah. And so, and I'm like, man, say what you will about Johnny Cash, but he had his business model figured out. Something Underneath is the first time on the album so far where David, like, really just lets it go into 10th gear. And then I love the chorus of this song. It just, like, throw on the emergency brake. And all the momentum that you had going that was just, like, barreling down this train track just comes to a screeching halt. You sit up straight a little bit because you're like, oh my god, something is wrong.
So this is where I thought we were really into horror movie land.
Yeah.
Although when it started out talking about the rain, it reminded me of the scene in Young Frankenstein where they say, Igor says, well, it could be worse, it could be raining.
And then it starts raining. That's a weird reference.
It is a weird reference.
That's a really weird reference, but I love that's where your brain went.
I love that. Yeah, that's
But
I think you could probably say you're the only person who listened to the new Clipping album and was like, this reminds me of Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's certain elements of the poetry that are like, you could lift it from a romantic era poem.
Oh, yeah.
Like birds in the trees don't sing as if the mountain peaks would break off. That's the kind of imagery you'd expect from romantic era poetry.
Yeah.
Turns out that when I was speaking 400 words a minute in college debate, that I had a skill that I could have made millions of dollars.
Who knew?
I didn't know.
Who knew? Yeah.
Then that leads us into Make Them Dead, which, in my opinion, is the most intentionally difficult to get through song on the project.
Is this the one with...
Yeah, it has that, like, really, really, like, jittering, really staticky sine wave that's just like...
It's like it's called the fax machine on accident.
Yeah, it's like you call the fax machine on accident. I love that.
It's really jarring.
But I have a weird... Like, I'm not going to put this on while I do my taxes or anything. But I do have a weird respect for it because of just how unpleasant and abrasive it is. And by the second minute, it's like, wow, I didn't know that noises could make it hard to breathe, but here we are. And I'm impressed by that. I'm so interested by the creative process that must have happened to arrive here that I don't want to turn it off.
It reminded me of the classical music piece that
Yeah.
caused a riot.
Yeah, Rite of Spring.
Yeah.
Yes, but I do find that I can listen to Rite of Spring, whereas this I was like, oh dear God, please can it end?
Yeah.
And can it end soon? But on that, Carl, kind of what you're talking about, that it's intentionally unpleasant, and that's...
It's doing its job so well.
It's doing its job so well.
That was the aim. It was definitely unpleasant.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's just like, in the visual art world, not every artist wants something to be pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it's all pretty, then it's not necessarily communicating ugly things.
Yeah.
This is really, vintage horror movie with the gate that hasn't been opened in 200 years and
the squeaky hinge.
Yeah, the squeaky hinge and she floats, so you
Right.
kind of got
And
this
using that kind of squeaky hinge sound all through the song.
Yeah, and
it's pretty
definitely
creates a mood.
Yeah, it creates a mood and it creates imagery also. And I wouldn't swear by this, but this would be a very, very Clipping-esque thing to do. I am willing to bet that almost every, if not every single sound you heard to make that beat was sampled from a gate.
So they spent a day driving around Los Angeles looking for cemetery gates.
Yeah, exactly. But see, you laugh at that, but they
I love that.
they have definitely done that before. Between the sounds that you gather through the instrumental and the imagery that is presented through the lyrics, like you can see that gate like perfectly in your mind's eye, and I love that.
The leaves are brown and the sky is gray and the dreams are shit and the mama ran away.
Yeah.
Papa drank, the got black. Yeah, that's some pretty dark imagery.
Yeah.
That's really concrete imagery, though.
All the leaves are brown and the sky is gray. I just went on a walk on a winter's day. That's a California Dreaming. That song is by the Mamas and the Papas. And the next lyric is, and the mama ran away and the papa drank the gut black.
See, David on some 4D chess shit out here.
There's
exactly. And then that leads us into Pain Every Day, which is one of my favorite songs on the record. The ending of this one is just, it's incredible. I love it so much because it has this really like sorrowful, pulls at your heartstrings orchestration happening.
Yeah, it's got actually something melodious.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
The background, and I was like, oh wait, I want that to pull out more.
Yeah, the rhythm sounds almost like some industrial process.
Yeah, exactly.
Crushing or stamping steel or something.
Yeah, and on paper, those two sounds and emotions should mix like orange juice and toothpaste, but for whatever reason, when they're brought together like this, it is head bobbing, it is beautiful, it is emotional.
Well, it's arresting.
Yeah, it's what?
It's arresting.
It's arresting. Yeah, it is arresting,
Yeah,
and it really
it makes you again stop and listen because especially that orchestration underneath, that's like nothing else that they have put on the album yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really unique moment.
It's like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful,
Yep.
and it's like this sorrowful bass and drum track, which is a thing I never thought I would say. It really is a moment where like the two elements of the song, the whole is greater than the sum of their parts. So that brings us into Check the Lock, which I think tells one of the clearest stories on the album. It's this really interesting juxtaposition of this former gang leader, or maybe still current gang leader, who is trying to be really, really hard and trying to be really, really tough, but is also just like cripplingly paranoid, and is just a really groovy, danceable song, but has this really, really, really fascinating character kind of in the middle of it. And I love all those images of him like checking his tailpipe, and he never parks outside of his own house.
Right. Yeah, this was one that was like, oh, I get this story. I see
you
this
totally,
story right away,
Looking Like Me is definitely just like the outright, not necessarily sonically creepiest, but like lyrically it's very like, oh, yikes, guys.
This one didn't feel horror movie to me anymore. This one I had a lot of discomfort with.
Okay.
Which, that might be exactly what they're going for.
Yeah. You're allowed to not like this
and
too,
especially in verse 2 where the other rappers were coming in and they were using a lot of words that, I'm not comfortable with it, that are, like, I'll strip you to your pussy meat. I'm sorry. You can dress that up any way you think you want to. That is offensive.
Oh, and I could have lived so many happy years of life
Without
never
hearing
my mother say that. Yeah,
but
fuck.
there it is,
Oh, wow.
right?
You asked.
Yeah, you know, I have no retaliation. There's a subculture of kind of greater hip hop that definitely goes for that shock value and just goes for like how gratuitous and how over the top can we make it. I'm not gonna say they shouldn't or they can't do that. I'm probably not gonna go out of my way to listen to that as often. Then we come into the last interlude of the album called Drove, which, again, I'm just super fascinated by this song because it's just a bunch of sheep braying and a motor running and some
They're
crickets.
cattle, son. Cattle.
They were cattle, not sheep.
Are you sure? I would have sworn they were sheep. They're going.
sure they're
Oh,
cattle.
no, they were
Well,
cattle.
there's okay. Well, this
Right.
track Drove has a bunch of livestock. The ending of this song is weird as hell, and I love
Like
it.
Eaten Alive?
Yeah, Eaten Alive.
Sound to us like somebody recorded you when you were a child,
Yeah.
banging on our pots and pans with wooden spoons.
Well, and this one kind of gets back to, it has, to me it had a little bit more of a narrative.
Yeah.
But it was a very different narrative than, say, Checking the Lock, because this one was much more rural
Yeah.
than that.
But like Florida rural.
But
like,
yeah, or
like
deep
south.
south. Deep
Like, yeah,
south,
in
you
the
know,
bayous.
Bayou, Florida, Louisiana, and you've been to any of those places, there is a spookiness to them. Then it also brought in the missionaries coming to the deep south.
Yeah, I loved this line. You passing through to spread your gospel, you gonna have to leave. Wrapped up in a casket are the only ones the pastor sees.
Well, and it's also kind of that reference to the Bayou had a culture
Yeah.
that wasn't particularly white and wasn't particularly Christian, and you know.
Well, those missionaries took care of that.
They tried to. Yeah, exactly.
Spreading the gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
The last song is Enlacing, which I don't really see as being so much as a story as the rest of them, but I do feel it as being sort of a reflection on a lot of different things that kind of some of the other stuff touched on. It's the only song on the album where we get to hear David go into his singing voice, which I actually really enjoy quite a bit. It sounds very, very sorrowful. A good deal of mourning, I feel, in his voice. It's just a very emotional and touching way to finish it out.
This made me think about the experience of listening to this album,
Mm.
which I know I'm going to sound old when I say this, but
That's fine.
back in my day, when I would get a new Joni Mitchell album,
Mm-hmm.
I would go and I would sequester myself and I would listen to it with the lyrics in front of me, and I wanted to experience and process the whole thing from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to listen to it when you could concentrate on it
Yeah.
and not just
Pop it on while you're cooking dinner.
pop it on, in the background or whatever. And I feel like that's what this type of album is demanding.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know that that's how much of the music that's being written today is asking the audience to
consume
do.
it, yeah.
Yeah, to consume it. Yeah, exactly. And I just thought this is not something that I'm going to put on while I'm fixing dinner.
No.
That's a pretty heavy dose of dystopia.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's pretty hard to listen to the whole thing in one sitting.
And that makes me have more respect for this.
Yeah, I do think that it is, and this has been consistent throughout Clipping's whole discography, is that they do ask a lot of the people who are listening. Let's give our final thoughts on what we thought of the record as a whole.
I was impressed. I was impressed with the sophistication of the lyric, even when some of it made me uncomfortable. I think that's what it was trying to do.
Yeah.
So I was impressed with it. It's not going to be my go-to listen unless it's Halloween, because it does have that kind of horror movie feel. And as I stated right in the beginning, that is my least favorite genre for movies, so it's not going to become my most favorite for music. Yeah. But
I think that's fair.
Yeah. But it was, I was impressed.
So I think it's like watching Blade Runner or some dystopian movie like that. I mean, those are important movies, and they have a lot of value in commentary on society and so on. But it's not easy to watch, and it's not easy to listen to this album.
Yeah,
because it is the imagery and the stories are so bleak. So not cheery, and not something that I would listen to every day, but it certainly is challenging and interesting.
My feeling on the album is there are songs on it like Say the Name or Pain Every Day or Check the Lock that I could listen to pretty frequently. I could see those being on my just, standard music listening diet. I'd probably only listen to the album all the way through top to bottom, like as an October tradition, as like, oh, here's, it's spooky season, let's set the mood with something that's like really truly like horrifying and unsettling, but in all of the best ways possible.